Hey guys, Torte de Lini here. There's a lot to go through as the developers drop big changes right on the last day of Hanukkah and before Christmas break. Those competing at ESL1 KLA event are definitely sweating as their world has been completely rocked. Let's not waste any time. Let's just jump right into patch 7.35, also known as Frostivus 2023. I think we should talk first about quality of life changes. A lot of them are really interesting. A lot of them are pretty great. Valve has finally added a lot of consistency in their information provisions, but also removed a lot of guesswork that you just had to know when playing Dota, which I really like. I personally love that, now the tower range indicator, where previously you had to hold the Alt key to see who the tower was targeting. Which was awkward when you have to focus on getting last hits and you're competing as well with the enemy who's trying to deny your last hits. So it's a nice touch to see that the tower is just instantly telling you who the hell they're trying to hit. Teleport time also really nice, as you can see here. Yeah, I think, overall when multiple people are TPing, it's kind of a gamble to know just how much extra time it's going to apply and whether it's more justifiable to TP to a previous tower in the back or maybe a watchtower or anything in between. I also like that they added more ability reticles. It helps with a lot of abilities that either didn't show their range indicators or frankly just didn't have the right ones. That said, I noticed Pugna's Nether Ward still doesn't show a range, which affects its reach. So there's still a few missed areas of indications that I would appreciate that they took a double look at. Yeah, in terms of general changes or general updates, this is kind of where we want to talk most. I think we can see a pattern with the developers want people back to fighting and ganking as opposed to what happened these past 8 months, which is, they've been farming and stalling, and games that were once 42 to 50 minute stretches should be much shorter now, or hopefully they should be much shorter, because there's been a massive de-emphasis on farming and the incentives on that have been significantly nerfed. So for example, neutral creeps bounty is decreased by 2 across the board. Is just something that will reduce the effectiveness of people farming jungle camps and more towards ganking a lot. Whether that will actually happen or not, we'll see. As you know, they tried something to that effect before by incentivizing more ganks with gold in patch 7.33 or 7.34. Didn't really work out. Games ended up being 42 to 60 minutes longer. Yeah, on top of that, they also made it so that games are going to be ending a lot quicker, or rather there's a lot less wiggle room to taking a risk when leaving your base when you're playing against super creeps or super mega creeps. The attack damage has been increased by 5, so it'll be much faster for them to take down towers, take down barracks and structures, as well as ancients. It's definitely a concern to be aware of. So they'll help outright just close out the game and those matches where you're tipping towards the edge of just them finishing out. They added watchers. Let's see if I can just type it out here. Watchers added in the mines and well areas. And I don't know if anybody has taken a look at what those are, but they're not exactly in the perfect place. They're a little redundant in that they're very close to the high ground warding spot. That's the only place you can ward effectively, or the most effectively, on the outer rims of those jungle areas when they expanded the map in 7.33. So if someone comes to kind of ward in that column, they'll evidently just go and take back that watcher as well, because it's right within the realm or right within the AoE reach of that column. There's a really cool change I really like here. Let's see if I can get it up here. Roshan now has some cool new abilities. He's got a roar of retribution. So basically, if attacked by the team that last killed him, Roshan will release this massive globally heard roar that damages all units within the 900 AoE and applies a debuff to them that increases the damage they take by 25%. It's a really nice touch. Basically, it not only signals to everyone that obviously your team is taking Rosh again, but more importantly, it slows down, or rather it significantly hurts your team who's taking Roshan. So if the enemy tries to interrupt you, you're obviously in a much weaker or much weakened state. Essentially, that's basically what it comes down to. One thing that you inherit kind of as a Dota player is the realization that the enemy is off the map. It could be taking Roshan at any moment. And, we've all had those games where it's like, I haven't seen the enemy in a while. They're probably taking Roshan. And kind of the issue with that kind of inherited feelings, by the time you realize it, you're also playing in your head that not only you have to spend the time to rally the troops to go take it and get everyone on board to that idea, but on top of that, you have to then determine if you realized it early enough to actually stop it, right? If you're on Radiant side and Roshan's being taken on the Dire side, you having to then smoke up and get the whole team running all the way to the other side of the map could be a waste of time if they end up taking Roshan pretty quickly, and that's kind of a bummer. As the game gets later, it's usually much harder to make your way to Roshan to ultimately prevent the enemy team from taking it because they take it very quickly. So here with Royal Retribution, not only are teams slowed when they are trying to take him, but it also removes the mystery you are confronted with if the enemy is taking Roshan or not, and it tells you how far along they are because the Roar of Retribution occurs at 80%, so you know they are not that far along, or they're not as far as you thought they would be. This is a really nice touch for players, but more importantly, it helps reduce that snowball effect of the leading team like taking Roshan again and again, and even 3 times back-to-back Roshan slayings. Another aspect that they really added that I really like is not only the alternating effect of, if they're on Dire or Radiant, you get different items, but they added one new Roshan item that I really like called Roshan's Banner. And what it essentially does is that it creates a banner anywhere on the map that buffs allied creeps for 45 seconds once they walk into the 750 radius. So it increases their health, it increases the damage, it helps push back a certain lane for your team, either defensively or offensively. It can be destroyed. It lasts for 5 minutes. But when lane creeps pass through it, it lasts for, I don't know, something like 40 seconds or 45 seconds, which is 45 seconds, which is pretty long. I think it's significantly longer than Dark Seer's Iron Shell, which really helps push the lane for a significant, at least half or a little less than half of the push. So I think it's a really nice touch. It helps amplify or defend high ground pushes. Like I said, it lasts a long time. Okay, let's talk about new items. There are 17 new items added into the game, including neutral items, and the return of some old favorites like Ring of Tarask, who I'm sure you guys can see here. Some of us have really missed that item. Royal Jelly and Magic Lamp. These are old school lovable neutral items that we didn't previously get to experience if you joined the game much later. A lot of these new neutral items revolve around kind of a trade-off, especially these tier 5 neutral items, such as, let's say, Unwavering Condition, which gives you, 95 magic resistance, but set your max health to 1500, which is kind of interesting. And tier 4 neutral item, Aviana's Feather, which gives you flying movement speed, but but you're at 30% HP, which is, again, you can only get that when you have 30% of your HP. So again, it's kind of a trade-off where, obviously you can escape a lot with it, but maybe for like a Bloodseeker, having that flying movement speed and being at lower health, or even, let's say, Huskar, where, you're always playing at kind of low health, 30 to 40% health, having that flying movement speed is pretty nice. It's pretty nice to have that kind of movement, so to speak, to stay on your opponents and not be kind of played out against, let's say, cliffs. The new items to kind of watch out for that aren't neutral items are right at the top here: Khanda as well as Parasma. I hope I'm reading those right. For Khanda, it's kind of an upgrade to Phylactery, where it's always had its niche value in the early game when you bought Phylactery, but no build up, so you kind of were conflicted on buying it or not. Some people really liked it. They really liked it on Nyx Assassin. I'm not that convinced about it. They liked it on Bounty Hunter. Again, I'm not that convinced about it. Zeus was a popular one. You'd buy it a lot on Zeus just because Arc Lightning with an extra slow and damage with Phylactery was really sweet. And now with this Khanda effect, it's really cool because now you do critical strike. Of course, when we talk about Zeus, we don't really think of him as a right clicker, but if you remember, Agshard now has an effect for Zeus where he can right click and it deals arc lightning damage. Now imagine arc lightning damage with a slow when you cast it manually, as well as a crit strike for a Zeus. I think we'll start seeing maybe some more right click Zeus, maybe. So really interesting. I'm hoping to see people build this more. It's a little expensive on the 5,000 side, so even more expensive than, let's say, a Glypnir, but the buildup is relatively convenient, I would say. Chrysalis with a Phylactery building up pretty easily, and then Chrysalis has always been an item that we love to build. So another item I talked about here is called Parasma, which is a replacement of Reverence Brooch and an upgrade to Witchblade. So it bolsters your intelligence by 45. It's pretty massive. It's almost double that of Mystic Staff. It also reduces the enemy's magic resistance with 20% by your attack. So heroes like Queen of Pain, Storm Spirit, Outworld Destroyer, who all build currently Witchblade. At least Storm Spirit and Outworld Destroyer build Witchblade. I think Queen of Pain doesn't, but she might switch to it now. They will especially love this item. Another new items I really like, but they're more on the neutral side, is personally Rattle Cage. Rattle Cage is kind of a sweet idea behind it. It's kind of like an improved blade mail, so to speak, in that not only does it give you 12 armor, which is nothing to sneeze at, it's the equivalent of a plate mail, but it also does mini power projectiles that fires back at 2 random enemies after taking 180 damage. Another neutral item I really like is Ancient Power. Ancient Power is not that impressive. Oh, excuse me, Ancient Guardian, but it has an effect called Ancient Power. Gives obviously 50 damage, which is nothing to sneeze at once more. On top of that, if you're near your ancient, 1200 or 2000, excuse me, range of your ancient, of an ancient, excuse me, so any ancient, whether your own or the enemies, it will give you another 50 damage, which is really crazy as a tier 4 item, not a tier 5, tier 4 item. So it's kind of a straightforward kind of item, neutral item, but giving you straight up 50 damage and then another 50 you're near either ancient is kind of cool. And so in terms of item changes, you'll see a lot of combinations either being replaced or adjusted with these new items. For example, you know, I think one of the new items I didn't talk about, which is really interesting, is the Tiara Celemene, which is the new basic set secret shop item, costs 1,800 and provides 6 mana regen. It's been a component that's been added into Sight Device, Refresher, Octarine Core, and the goal for this kind of item is to move, or rather remove, the value you would get from certain other items. So Sight Device, Octarine Core, and Refresher are obviously used to use Void Stone, and so the point was to remove the extra emphasis or the value players were getting when disassembling items, and to give them more item diversity when building towards larger items. So for example, you know, it sucks, like I said, the Octarine Core no longer takes 2 Void Stones. However, by purchasing this Tiara instead, it gives you more than triple than what 2 Void Stones gives you, and it only takes 1 slot. Same thing regarding Ring of Tarrasque. Ring of Tarrasque is the alternative, or rather the mirror to Tiara for health heroes, or for rather health and health regeneration. Heart of Tarrasque and Pipe of Insight, those are 2 items that come to mind when it comes to Ring of Health as well as Refresher Orb. Now those require Ring of Tarrasques instead, and so now the Ring of Health is part of a 2-tier item system where Ring of Health and Void Stone only provide access to earlier game items, and Tiara and Ring of Tarrasque now give you access to larger items. So there's kind of a clear line of where, you know, disassembling to keep your Ring of Health or to keep your Void Stone now only provides lateral moves rather than a transition, or an easier transition to bigger items. Another big change is Arcane Boots. Now requires a Ring of Bazi instead of the Arcane Orb. The first intention is, one, again, to remove disassembling value from the Arcane Orb, and the second is previously building towards it was a big leap for some support heroes if they had a bad lane or honestly were not that efficient with managing their gold. It meant that you were basically mana poor for a long period of the game than intended if you didn't somehow manage to get Arcane Boots. Arcane Boots also had a limited value as the game got later, because, you know, usually you had no longer a justification to keep it, since you were more than stocked with mana as you bought, you know, a variety of different items that gave you mana or gave you stats and intelligence to eventually give you a larger mana pool. I don't know how I feel about this change personally. I mean, because once you build it, you're kind of stuck with Arcane Boots. The only build up you can with this item is Guardian Greaves. So for heroes like Lina and Zeus, who were, you know, used to go Arcane Boots, disassemble to make 8 Lens or whatever, and then would go, let's say, Boots of Travel, they're stuck with Arcane Boots. Means you can no longer build into 8 Lens, as I talked before, and those heroes are pretty unlikely to build Guardian Greaves, in my opinion. Arcane Boots used to kind of create this black hole effect where all your early game mana problems mostly were solved by this item, and now if you don't want to go Arcane Boots, you'll need to rely on other small items to give you that jolt of mana. Another big change here is Echo Saber no longer, let's blow up on Echo Saber here. Echo Saber no longer provides intelligence or attack speed and costs a tiny bit more. My stance is like this is just a change to help reduce its value for universal attribute heroes who got a lot of extra damage from the intelligence and strength attributes. So in general, I would say it's gotten better for those who are not universal heroes like Slardar and Sven, but obviously if you're like, I don't know, this is a very basic example. If you're a Magnus, or even there's some Pause 1 Lycan players that like to build Echo Saber, you're not getting as much from it and you're spending a little bit more. So it's a trade-off once again. So let's talk about Eternal Shroud, which is one slide down. Eternal Shroud is someone who's kind of going through an identity crisis, and the developers are really trying to squeeze this item into being very valuable without being overpowered. When you read his new description, I can understand you are maybe a little bit confused. I know I was the first time I read it, so let's go through it together. So for starters, Eternal Shroud is the only magic resist item that you can build from disassembling your Vanguard. So we now know what direction they want to shove this item for. All flaners like Centaur, Darkseer, even Pudge, or Timbersaw. Timbersaw's perfect example. Actually, Timbersaw, to be honest, at the moment doesn't really build Vanguard, but I think with Eternal Shroud, he might now want to do it, except Timber kind of loved Pipe of Insight for his team, since he was always kind of in the middle of battles. Eternal Shroud now offers less magic resist initially, right? 25% instead of 35%, which is around the same as Pipe of Insight, but it now has a new passive where for every 300 magical damage you take, you get a stack, and that stack gives you, what, 4% additional magic resist? So in short, from the get-go, it sounds like it's a way better item, but you have to keep in mind that with more magic damage you take, the more stacks you'll receive, but since each stack gives you more resistance, you'll also take less damage. Thus, reaching 6 stacks of 4% becomes harder and harder without taking a significant amount of damage. So in my opinion, this item is pretty terrible, and it's also more expensive, and those who nuke you from the get-go or nuke you very quickly probably laugh at Eternal Shroud. So let's talk about the item right after that. Ethereal Blade. Ethereal Blade is now even more expensive, but has more value since you need Aether Lens to build into it. Remember, Aether Lens cannot be made through Arcane Boots anymore, since you can't disassemble Arcane Boots, but more importantly, Arcane Boots isn't using Arcane Orb anymore. It uses Ring of Bazi. So you're definitely getting a bank loan just to afford this new Ethereal Blade. It's gone up from 4650 to 5375. Basically, Ethereal Blade is no longer a mid to late game item, but it now a full-blown late game item, but deals actually less damage. It no longer relies on Kaya. Ethereal Blade will continue to be good for heroes like Zeus and maybe Lina, and in fact, it sounds like a net win, albeit you are buying it much later than before, and thus you don't get as much value of it throughout the game. Small mention real quick for Eye of Skadi, it having a percentage scaling attack speed reduction instead of the flat 3060 that I had before is a very valuable item late game. I think we're going to definitely start seeing this item be picked up a lot. Another really big change here you can see with the Medallion of Courage that immediately leads you to check in on the health of Solar Crest, and unfortunately Solar Crest is dying. Solar Crest has been nerfed in a big way with its recipe change. Seeing Medallion removed from the game means it's no longer a component for Solar Crest, and this is kind of a gut punch to a lot of strong early game laners like Nature's Prophet, Vengeful Spirit, and Klinks. But I mean, to add insult to injury, they force you to buy Pavis, which no longer provides mana regen, but does give you a larger mana pool thanks to its new recipe needing Arcane Boots. This shifts a lot of early game dynamics offensiveness to be more about out-sustaining in ganks and engagements, and less on mitigating the effectiveness in some matchups where Medallion would practically oppress against some heroes and foes in the lane. And it made the build up for Solar Crest incredibly quick and easy because you were already succeeding with Medallion, thus you would get more gold, thus you would pick up Solar Crest much quicker, which would be very oppressive into the mid-game ganks. The final nail in the coffin is really the fact that you can no longer use Solar Crest on enemies either, so it completely removes half its value. It's an old item with a new face, so to speak. Orb Corrosion, I really like it. It seems to be kind of the new Medallion of Courage with no build-up, so obviously less value post early game. Gives a little more risk and yet more reward. Orb of Corrosion no longer requires a Blightstone, but still has an Orb of Venom and the Ring of Protection and the Gloves of Haste, similar to a Medallion of Courage components. Obviously not the same, and the cost is approximately the same. Obviously the new OOC slows, but also now reduces health regen, lifesteal, and spell lifesteal by 20%. And the poison damage over time affects, which is a nice touch. It affects towers specifically. This item sounds interesting, and for heroes that were already considering it like lifesteal, or even supports that want to bruise tanky offlaners that were buying Ring of Health like Centaur or Axe, this is an item definitely up to snuff on consideration. We're talking about Meteor Hammer, also went kind of the wayside similar to Solar Crest in that it's had its recipe change. Crown Kaya and 800 gold is the new recipe to make Meteor Hammer. Now Meteor Hammer no longer gives mana or health regen, but also revolves around the spell amp with Kaya and mana regen amplification of the Kaya. I personally don't really care for this item. I can't really see the justification for it except to add diversity in Kaya when it lost its diversity after Ethereal Blade moved away. What's kind of worse is that they made the damage from its active spell weaker to units and buildings, and the cost has been bumped up. I cannot think offhand of a single hero that wants to take advantage of this, except the heroes who like to build it before, like Treant Protector or maybe Outward Destroyer. Though honestly, as I mentioned before, OD usually builds Witchblade and a new Parasma, which seems pretty strong. The one hero that really thrived with Meteor Hammer, especially during the laning stage, was Tidehunter. So he doesn't really see value in these components. So I'm not really sure he's going to be buying that item anymore. Lastly, I think we talked about Revenant's Brooch when talking about her better cousin Parasma, but Revenant's Brooch has been shifted to be more of an endgame general damage item, and I really like it. You no longer need a Witchblade for it, but rather you rely on Sacred Relic and Voodoo Mask as its component. We were already seeing heroes like Templar Assassin pick up Revenant's Brooch late game to deal with ethereal units like Muerta, since she can actually compete with Muerta thanks to the refraction blocking damage. Now late game, Radiance buyers like Alchemist, Spectre, Wraith King, even Lifestealer, they can disassemble their Radiance to build 3 beautiful, interesting items. One is Divine Rapier, one's Nullifier, and one's now Revenant's Brooch. Revenant's Brooch still allows you to hit ethereal units, but now it's a toggle, and it deals magical damage at the cost of 75 mana. You spell Lifesteal off of it, which is a pretty cool switch up in damage output type. Previously, honestly, physical damage dealers like Wraith King relied on MKB late game to help deal with varied attack damage to sidestep kind of those high armor rivaling carries, but MKB wasn't really guaranteed, and honestly the damage was fine, just it was the only alternative. Let's talk about Shiva's Guard. Shiva's Guard, I think it's a new era where Shiva's Guard, I think, is actually very overpowered. I don't know, honestly, how they let this item go through, because it is no longer slanted towards int heroes. It gives +8 attributes to all your attributes, so agi, int, and strength. It builds up from Veil of Discord, which is a bit more expensive and also has been changed. It builds from Helm of the Iron Will and Crown instead of Ring of Bazi before. I think Shiva's Guard applies the Veil of Discord effect, which is now casted from your universal, from your hero in a 900 radius. So there's no more like blinking with Queen of Pain, then Veil of Discord, then using your ability. There's no delay on that anymore. Now it's 100% blink with Queen of Pain, do an AoE around you, and then deal your damage. Queen of Pain doesn't really buy that. I'm thinking of more of like a Gyrocopter, for example. Support Gyrocopter. Obviously the main example we're really thinking of is Tinker. You know, if you thought Tinker was extinct, this item definitely brings him back from research, definitely gives him a resurgence, so to speak, in more broader terms. So Shiva's Guard being more valuable for a wider range of heroes means fighting against uber late carries and illusions will be a more team capable thing than a single rivaling carry's responsibility from Radiance or Battlefield or whatever. Silver Edge in my opinion is now a late game item. It's relatively the same cost. It's actually the same exact cost. More and more we've been seeing right clickers, physical carries buy Silver Edge super late game, even if they had Blink Dagger earlier on. It's no longer an alternative item depending if you need break or not for Blink Dagger, but a viable late game option that gives you great attack speed, break, and additional damage, as well as crit and positioning with invisibility. It was kind of a perfect item, so to speak, and it really overshadowed Daedalus. Now Silver Edge requires a Demon Edge, which is to be built, and unfortunately it no longer deals critical damage. So Daedalus is one of 2 items to be able to deal crit, the other one being Khanda, the new item. On top of all, the Demon Edge cost means that you building up to it is a lot less convenient and a lot less safe to pull off with your unguaranteed gold, and thus we'll be seeing this item come much later and likely later in matches. There's 116 out of 124 heroes have been changed since this patch. The majority are pretty small changes and adjustments. Obviously the big changes are really around the itemization, how they're going to build these heroes. These 19 heroes you're seeing here have received the largest changes that I feel warrant mention. The first one is going to be Axe. Axe has this Culling Blade, which now gives a big armor boost when using it instead of attack speed. Was an evident adjustment that I was kind of surprised it took this long to do. The extra armor on top of the movement speed plays well with Axe's Battle Hunger and Berserker Call follow-up through, you know, these big team fights. It's got good synergy with Ag Scepter, which lowers the Berserker Call cooldown and applies a Battle Hunger to enemies who are taunted with the Ag Scepter effect. So with a big armor, temporary boost of Culling Blade, and it now casting Battle Hunger on everyone when you use Berserker's Call, and Berserker Call having a lower cooldown, it means you can kind of spiral out of control and damage with the battle hunger, now dealing more damage by the factor of how much armor you have. Chen's big change is to Divine Favor. Divine Favor now gives basically a plate mail level armor at level 1, which is pretty fucking huge. I can't believe that during the early game, on top of increasing the amount of healing you receive by 20% when, you know, including Chen's ultimate or Guardian Greaves. I really like this change for Chen because it gives Chen more options of controlled saving options beyond the Hand of God, which goes to everyone. And his units can really amplify a team's kind of surviving backbone to astronomical levels in the late game. So nice touch for Chen. Really interested to see if people are going to put an early point in Divine Favor. If you do, it does give health regen to all allied units within the range, so you're obviously affecting the lane equilibrium with that. So for Dazzle, Dazzle losing item cooldown from Bad Juju is kind of killing a lot of its overpoweredness. I'm not sure if it's justified in playing the hero in a core role, especially as a mid anymore, but I mean, he still has incredible strength with spamming Poison Touch with the Ag Shard effect and a permanent Shallow Grave when buying Octarine Core thanks to Bad Juju. It's just broken items, permanent, it's just broken items like permanent uptime from Octarine Core when you use Shadow Grave, or how about the permanent uptime of Arcane Blink, right? You Arcane Blink, you heal with it, and then you get a little mana back, and then you just press Bad Juju again. I mean, completely neglected any downside of using Bad Juju consistently. So it really hurts Dazzle late game, as well as anyone who used to get Hand of Midas on him. But I'm not 100% thinking this puts Dazzle in the dirt. I think he's still very strong. Right below her or him, Death Prophet now has a slow when using her silence in an attempt to give her more control in fights and guaranteed maximized value in her Spirit Siphon. 10% is rather poor at level 1, and the only way you could justify getting silence earlier on is for that slow. But I mean, most Death Prophets get it at level 8, so 10% slow at level 8, it's kind of negligible. So I think this slow is nice. I just think it's only valuable late game. Gyrocopter's ultimate ability, Call Down, has been massively changed. Instead of a single double rocket slow and damage AoE effect, it's now 3 missiles with an incredible cast range that shoots in a straight line. Really cool. So enemies who are running away or chasing you will be slowed for 50%, and they'll take 550 damage per missile strike. The original Gyrocopter ability was really cool and nice, but was relying on someone else to initiating, or your magic missile having to stun the enemy within a range and for long enough that you can pull off the double missile hit from your ultimate. Here you have a bit more wiggle room. You can do it from much farther away. You have a much larger range, and there's some overlap between the 3 missile hits, so you can actually hit people for massive damage if you do it right. It's got a little bit of a skill shot to it. On top of that, Gyrocopter's support builds were building a Veil of Discord combined with Rocket Barrage, and now with the build up to Shiva's Guard, I think this hero is going to be really top tier support. Let's go down to Juggernaut. Juggernaut's kind of returning, and maybe with the old Maelstrom build, I don't know. Instead of the standard damage when using Blade Fury, right, where you do a damage rate of, let's say, 1 every second. It's not a second, but every swing you do a standard damage with Blade Fury. Now it deals damage at the rate of his attack speed, if I understand it correctly. So any items you pick up that gives attack speed, which Juggernaut already builds, Yasha, Butterfly, even Maelstrom now has it. Juggernaut will do more damage when using Blade Fury as well. The trade-off is that like items like Ag Shard, the version of Blade Fury for Ag Shard now just only increases the radius of the ability, but it slows enemies. So the Ag Shard has been nerfed in a way, or has more of crowd control for Juggernaut. Going through it, Lion mana drain now deals damage based on how much mana he drains, on top of already slowing his target and stealing all their mana. Top tier change, memes put aside, even without the Ag Shard and talent benefits. Really interesting to see how much Lion will be picked up more from this, because now he can harass with mana drain in the laning stage. I think it's really cool and really interesting. Lone Druid, Bear having no armor now at level 1. It's basically a big nerf to the hero, but also it's just really nice for people playing against Lone Druid who just felt overwhelmed trying to take down 2 heroes. But more importantly, feeling like, you know, you kill the bear, he just comes right back before you have a chance to kill him again. They've also removed the slow on Bear's Ag Shard fetch, which allowed you to drag enemies to Lone Druid now at an even faster rate, since you're building phase boots on Lone Druid and the bear. and thus you get more distance to pull enemies back towards you. Another big change here, I think, is Muerta. Muerta, just real quick, has been nerfed in an interesting way. Her gunslinger can be toggled, but it no longer prioritizes heroes. That means she can waste a lot of shots on enemy-controlled creeps or even laning creeps. Your only guaranteed targeted damage is from who you're shooting at, so heads up on that small nerf. Let's talk about Omni Knight. Omni Knight, I think, has received also, similar to Gyrocopter, has kind of received an ultimate change that makes them a lot less awkward to play. Guardian Angel has been nerfed in the sense that it's now a single target ability instead of a massive AoE that blocks physical damage, but it comes with 2 charges. So instead of that awkward time where you need to be in the middle of the fight and you have to guarantee you can save everyone within your AoE, you weren't sure if everyone's within that AoE or not when you needed it, versus, let's say, Juggernaut's ultimate ability, Omni Slash, you can now safely cast Guardian Angel from a good distance, along with your other abilities that you're using, like Repel. I think it's still called Repel. His Acceptor also got a cool buff in that you can now do it on 3 allies. It will be automatically given to you, and if you cast it on yourself, it'll be given to an ally regardless, and it's global, so you can do it from down freaking town, and someone will get that invulnerability, or physical invulnerability, I should say. Tinker, though, I talked about Tinker as maybe coming back. I think we might see him return. He has he's been nerfed in a way, right? His laser and heat-seeking missiles have had their range nerfed, but he makes up for it with a really cheap root ability with Warp Flare that comes from a Black Shard. Also Rearm giving some magic resistance, so that's really nice as well. Let's not forget that Shiva's Guard is still an incredible item for him, and now Shiva's has a Veil of Discord effect, which means you'll likely see him being built in these coming matches, which Shiva's Guard was already a pretty essential item for Tinker. Speaking of essential, Viper still has his break, don't worry, but now it's on Nether Toxin. Nether Toxin for Viper lost its break, which is now applied to his ultimate ability, Viper Strike. What that means is kind of a trade-off. There's less break value when picking Viper. However, the hero you do apply break to with using your ultimate is now more in line with your follow-through as the hero. So whoever you target with Viper Strike, it obviously goes through Black King Bar, which means your break will go through Black King Bar. And that means it's kind of a net win when picking Viper to specifically say you want to counter, let's say, a Bristleback who builds BKB. It's not a huge loss because you'll just Viper Strike him specifically and he'll have break, and it's for a pretty good duration. So it's been 5 months since 7.34. We saw a lot of issues stemming from that patch where tanky offlaners were kind of dominating the meta and agility carries were completely suppressed from making an appearance except for a select few. Luminous Spectre, for example. What was supposed to be kind of an active meta ended up being kind of a snooze fest for 45 to 60 minutes. This patch has definitely flipped things around, but not just for offlaners, but also in the division of early game itemization and build up to late game diversification of items and abilities. What I like to call kind of black hole items have been further reduced in their reach, like Vanguard or Arcane Boots, no longer providing useful early game value past their initial point. While also helping push certain heroes to get a jump on late game items like Hard Thrust, Lotus Orb, or Arcane Core. Obviously, we lost a few great friends along the way, right? Solar Crest is kind of a bummer. It also helped nerf kind of heroes that you originally didn't really consider, like Nature's Prophet, that I think was one of the few heroes that was not touched here, except for his itemization. That said, I think there's a clear outline in the direction that we're seeing Valve go, where the early game is no longer as dictatory in all matters when it comes to late game, and we're seeing kind of an even wider bloom of late game item choices for players, whether you're a universal attribute hero, whether you're an intelligence hero, a caster, right click caster, etc. I think overall these are very nice changes. It's just going to be a little awkward getting used to it for a lot of players, and I think the way the current pace of games are going, where it's like high adrenaline in the early game to a lull period where games are kind of quiet and everyone tries to farm up their late game items in preparation for that late game period, is going to be really interesting to see. I think what Valve was hoping for, or what the developers are trying to push for, is instead of what we originally had a few years ago, which was long periods of early game, like 12 to 13 minutes, and that laning stage just being like horrendously boring and dull, especially for support players, it's become this very shortened period of like 6, 7, 8 minutes. 8 minutes even long for laning stage. And instead of there being a long period of a late game, instead of it being a long period for a late game, I think we're seeing just a long period of a medium game that transitions into a late game that ends around hopefully 45 minutes. I think heroes like Gyrocopter are going to be very popular. I think heroes like Tinker could see a resurgence coming back. I think heroes like Lina and Spectre are still pretty good. I'm just unsure what the meta pace is going to be like. Is it going to still be a little bit of a farm fest into a lot of fighting, or are we going to see full-blown brawls from minute 15 onward? It remains to be seen, and it'll take me a few weeks at least to update those hero builds. So stay tuned for the coming weeks for the hero build updates, and happy holidays from me to you.